Recent research has shown a promising use of psychedelics in treating various mental health conditions with the support of a medical practitioner. Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Reicheter, and today I'm joined by April Pride, the founder of Like Minds and the host of the High Guide podcast, where she continues her work educating women on the potential of cannabis for their personal health and happiness. Join us as April discusses her journey living with ADHD and how psychedelics have helped her manage her ADHD symptoms. April, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to learn more about you and your work, but before we begin, I really just want to check in. How are you really?
How am I really? I didn't see a talk therapist for my entire life. And I did go a couple of times to various people, but last year I found someone who was really great. And due to budget, I'm feeling better. And I haven't seen her since the end of last year. And I sent her a message a couple of hours ago. So I guess that's how I'm doing, really.
Thank you for the honesty. I'm kind of at that point where I was seeing a therapist for a while. I stopped. And then as of yesterday, I was like, need to go back to therapy. And that's something that's so real that happens all the time. And yet a lot of people don't talk about it, that it's okay to go back to therapy. It's okay to take a break. It's not always easy to afford therapy, to access therapy. It can take time to find a therapist that works for you, but it's always okay to go back and to continue to get support. Even if you think you've healed from it or grown through it, it's still okay to reach out. So I love that answer.
That's how I'm feeling, really. Yeah.
Well, on that note, tell us a little bit about your mental health journey.
Well, it's interesting, right? I didn't know that I was having one when I was having one for nearly 40 years. When I was 37 years old, I read an article in the Daily Beast. The headline was that women ages 24 to 36 are the most undiagnosed group of people with ADHD.
Oh, wow.
And then the article proceeded to, it was like my life story. It was super. Turns out that the things that had happened to me were very textbook to a woman specifically, who had not been diagnosed with ADHD as a child. So I was reading about really, really structured in high school, very type A, a perfectionist, probably had an eating disorder, check, 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 and then went to college and the wheels came off. No structure. I was introduced to drinking I had been introduced to it, but I chose not to participate in high school. And I had my first semester of college back to back. First semester, best semester, no drinking. Second semester, worst semester of the 4 years. Wow. Just in that first year, once I started drinking. And fast forward, I'd gone through nearly every street drug. I had been diagnosed with bipolar, which I didn't take seriously because my dad also had been misdiagnosed with bipolar. So I knew to question that diagnosis, and depression, a whole litany of things. When I was diagnosed with bipolar, I had gone in because I thought I had PMDD, which is when you're suicidal leading up to you can be suicidal leading up to your cycle, your period. So when I read that article, when I was 37 years old, all of these details were also included. Misdiagnosed with bipolar, very emotional, I guess you could say, or unpredictable emotions around your cycle. And ultimately, yes, I got a diagnosis of ADHD at 38 years old. And my dad had been diagnosed at 42 with ADHD. So nobody ever would thought that I had that I would be diagnosed with ADHD because, I'm not bouncing off the walls, but I was, pretty avid runner. I still exercise quite a bit, right? Because I do have that side of me. And it's just a good habit that I started when I was probably 12 years old, that I've kept up and has really helped me manage my ADHD. So having that diagnosis later in life, I have a son who's 13 years old and he was diagnosed about 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm so grateful for the modalities that I adopted over 38 years to be able to manage my ADHD but also when I was written a prescription to Adderall. And that was interesting too, because at first they wanted to write me a prescription for Ritalin, but I had abused Ritalin. I would steal my dad's in my 20s. And so I was not excited about doing that because it would just lead me. I would want to smoke cigarettes, all the things. It was not the medicine for me. It was definitely something that I would abuse. But the 3 times I had tried Adderall, also recreationally, I didn't drink those nights. I didn't have any desire to. I remembered every single detail. My friends I couldn't understand what they were saying. It was really, they were not well. Mixing alcohol and Adderall didn't work out for them. So I shared this with my doctor and she said, well, then I think we should start there, right? If it made you feel good and you had more control over your impulses. So the medication worked beautifully for me. And I immediately stopped exercising. I didn't exercise for almost a year.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I had started meditating. So I kept meditation in my daily practice, but I didn't feel this compulsion to exercise to make myself feel better. So I actually had to bring that back into the fold. But it's those types of ways to manage how my symptoms would present, I guess, or my diagnosis would present, that I've tried to impart to my son, who chooses to take medication sometimes, but has thankfully, been open to choosing exercise and sleep as, 2 things he can really, and his diet. He's a kid, but he does a pretty good job to control his symptoms. But I guess that's where we are today. I'm 47. And so I've been on some form of a stimulant medication, as well as Wellbutrin, for almost a decade. And I don't know how long I'm allowed to stay on these things, but I am very grateful that the medication does work for me.
I'm so glad that you got the diagnosis and you got the medication that's right for you, because that's such a long journey to get there, to get to the point where you finally have the tools that you need when you need them. And one thing that always blows my mind is how women are most likely to be misdiagnosed or not diagnosed with ADHD till way later in life, because it does present differently in a female and a male. Male, the hyperactivity is a lot more present, so it tends to be diagnosed a lot earlier. It even may be overdiagnosed in some situations. But with females, it tends to be very undiagnosed until way later, and it presents as all these different symptoms. And people take years trying to figure out what's going on, why they're feeling this way, trying different medications, different therapy modalities, before they finally get some kind of answer to take the next step that's right for them.
Totally. Yeah. And one of the same kid, when he was 13, when he was born, I had stopped drinking after his birth. And about a year after he was born, I told his dad and that I was suicidal, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. I was doing everything right. And that's when I started meditating. I was like, I've tried everything and I have not tried meditation. That's the one thing everyone's told me I should try. And what I learned is that if you have ADHD, that when you're postpartum, your hormones are just, all over the place. And so the chances of your ADHD becoming very acute and the symptoms becoming very acute and becoming very overwhelmed with everything that you need to get done in a day, which is always 3 times more than a normal person sets out to do in a day. It became too much for me. And meditation really did save my life at that point, I feel. Yeah.
I love that. Knowing what tool works for you is so important, but to be so willing to try. And first of all, I did not know that about ADHD and childbirth and how that can present into suicidal ideation. It's not something that I think is talked about very often. So I'm glad you brought attention to that. And when it came to meditation, what was that initial experience like for you, where you're like, okay, I want to try meditating, and then actually doing it? Because I think a lot of people just don't know where to start.
Well, the first thing is that I tried it because I had no choice, right? I had 2 kids and I was not well, and I couldn't drink. I knew that was not going to help the situation at all. So I So I knew there was a sign outside of a church in my neighborhood that had meditation on Wednesdays and Fridays at 9 a.m. So I showed up. Just, yeah, I didn't really know I think this was really before there were apps for meditation, right? So, I mean, 13 years ago, 12 years ago. So I started going, and I was traveling for work and I had young kids. So I really was kind to myself. And if I could go once a week, I felt like that was good. When I was going twice a week, that was great. So I did that for 4 years, right? I did it for 4 years. Okay, I'm doing this. I'm seeing a difference. I'm kind of trying to do it on my own. But what I ended up doing is investing in transcendental meditation training, because that was the only type of meditation that had, at that point, it was over 700 medical research studies that have been completed that showed that this type of meditation has this positive impact on your physical health, your mental health, right? So I went for a weekend, and that's what I do, 20 minutes when I wake up in the morning. They instruct you to do it twice a day. If it's a good day, I will. That happens once every 6 months. Sometimes it happens more, though, at certain times when I'm feeling like I don't really know how to organize my day.
Yeah.
I'll just go back and sit and meditate just to kind of like finish the day off and get squared away again. But yeah, that's the meditation that I've chosen. And I hear from people with ADHD all the time, how can you sit still? I can't sit still at all. What, it's a practice. You have to do it long enough to see that it's working, and then you are really motivated.
That makes sense. I know for me, I live with bipolar 2 disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. And when I tried meditation for the first time, it was post psych ward after attempting, and I could not sit still with my thoughts. So I wrote off meditation completely. I was like, this does not work for me. I can't do this. I keep crying. And I just wrote it off. And then maybe 2 years later, someone had introduced me to breath work. And they were like, this is the gateway to meditation. So it was something that I was constantly, I guess, actively breathing very heavily through it, that my mind was so focused on that and not trying to be silent. Then I got to a point where I could actually start using meditation apps. I think in the beginning it was 30 seconds before I would just start crying. And then I got to a point where I could do it for a couple minutes. And it makes such a difference, at least for me, to be able to shut off my mind for a little bit and get into the present, because I'm one of those people who is doing a million things in my mind at all times. I mean, I'm the person who's up at 3 a.m. just writing down ideas of things I need to get done. So it's hard for me even to sleep. So meditation has been something that's allowed me to kind of calm and get into the present so I can sleep. Otherwise, I'm 3 hours of sleep and running on a lot of caffeine.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, it does. I mean, that was part of the medical studies showed the impact that it had on your sleep. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's so many benefits to it. But now, switching over, so we learned about your mental health journey, but now tell us about where you are today.
So today, I don't take Vyvanse anymore because it's so bloody expensive. So I do take a time released Adderall, and I still take my Wellbutrin, but my stimulant medication has been reduced to half every day, because I started last summer working with Psychedelics to intentionally to do a couple of things. One, I really did want to reduce my intake of both my stimulant medication, because I had a feeling, and yesterday I took my normal dose, the double dose, and I shouldn't have, right? So it really was too much for too many years. And then I had started pre-pandemic, I work in cannabis and psychedelics. I've been working in cannabis since 2015. And during the pandemic, I became a daily weed smoker, every day, all the time, just no rules around it. And then I got divorced, and I kept up my habit, knowing that I gave myself a year It's like, you know what, you can do this for a year. You can do what you need to do to get through this year. And then a year came around, and I also have a podcast called The High Guide, which is a show about women who are changing their lives with altered states of consciousness. So I was contacted by a ketamine telehealth company to interview one of their clinicians, their lead clinician. And I had been doing a lot of research, and I knew that ketamine off-label was being used for substance use disorder. And so I went through the screening on my own without them, and paid and did all of it and tried ketamine. And after my first treatment, I didn't consume any cannabis for a month.
Wow.
And yeah. And then the second time I had, and these are at home low dose lozenges that are shipped to your house, and that is no longer available to patients. It was a COVID era loophole so that medical practitioners could see their patients when people couldn't be seen in person. So the ketamine companies came in and were like, oh, we can do this too. And it was very, very convenient, but it's also terrifying, and people should not have ketamine shipped to their house. I don't care how low the dose is. It's really not a good idea, in my opinion. Although I do think that there are special cases for people where if they wouldn't get a ketamine treatment, if it didn't arrive at the doorstep and they really need it, then, there is that too. So who am I to really say? So the second time though, what was the most significant, the first time I was really focused on cutting down my cannabis. The second time I had done more research and had started interviewing people. And I really feel there's not a lot of research about this, but there will be. Ketamine is amazing for people with ADHD. After my second treatment, the next morning, I sat at my desk without any medication, and I worked in a way that I don't know that I have not worked that way in a very, very long time. And so what I learned was that ketamine works on glutamate. It produces glutamate. It works on AMPA receptors and BDNF receptors. So it's helping to create neuroplasticity in our brain. And one thing in particular that glutamate does is it repairs dendrites. And dendrites are these finger-like attachments on our receptors that can, think of it this way, that can catch the glutamate, that can catch not the glutamate, can catch the serotonin, can catch dopamine, can catch, whatever neurotransmitter is intended to interact with that receptor. And stress hormone, cortisol, over and over and over again in our lives causes these dendrites to retract. And so there's nowhere these neurotransmitters can't connect to your brain network, right? Glutamate repairs them so they can start interacting with neurotransmitters again. And it is all related to our prefrontal cortex, BDNF and the AMPA pathway. So I'm not a medical practitioner. I can't really drill down on this too much. Although I do have podcast episodes about it and there are medical professionals on there, but I can tell you that it is pretty clear to me that people with ADHD could really benefit from ketamine in some capacity. I don't know if that's the higher doses or if it's a daily low dose or a weekly low dose. I don't know, but I certainly feel like it's been very helpful for me when I've been able to do it.
That is such a useful information that's not talked about. I know, so my younger brother, he has ADHD, and it took years for him to find a medication. I think we were counting it the other day. I think it was like 8 years. It took so long for him to get to a point where he found a medication that helped him enough that he could pass school, that he could find some kind of ability to stay focused and organized and calm, but also be himself and have a personality. And it's so disheartening to see how the medication is so, first of all, difficult to access because the prices, a lot of insurance companies don't want to cover it anymore, is what I'm hearing. And there's shortages, which is blowing my mind that people need this and it's not very accessible, which I feel like is the same in everything medical. So we need to work on that so much.
Right. Because I'm imagining people with ADHD produce a lot more cortisol.
Yeah.
Right. Or we're up there with being high producers of cortisol. So yeah, having dendrites that need repairing, I'm sure is something we all have in common. Yeah.
Yeah. so important. We're looking at ways to repair things, ways to, like you said, taking that dose of medication, how high it was, and how it's like you don't need that high of a dose anymore.
Yeah.
It's so important to realize how much medication we're putting into people's bodies, if it's the right medication for them and appropriate for them and for their brain development.
Exactly. Right. I mean, like I said, 10 years, I'm going on 10 years on this medication. I'm just waiting for a doctor to for the news to come out, or a doctor to tell me, or some of the side effects to really start to have an impact on my life, which fortunately hasn't been the case yet. So besides dry mouth, which really sucks for being a podcast host.
Yeah, I always have the water next to me at all times.
Yeah.
It's really frustrating, I think, with medication. For me, one thing I realized lately, so with the bipolar 2 disorder and the anxiety, it really presents as a lot of depression. So I'm my grandmother's caretaker. She lives with Alzheimer's. So I have a lot of extra stress that's caused more of the depression lately. And my psychiatrist was like, okay, let's add in an antidepressant. And it was up too high. And I ended up like extremely, extremely sick, not feeling well at all, like on the floor. It was bad. And it sent me into like this episode, like this deep depressive spiral where I was barely able to keep myself safe. And we see that happening a lot with medications. We see it happening that we're trying to guess. It's a big guessing game. And not saying I'm against medication. I take medication every day. Like I'm for
Yeah. Right.
medication when it's right for you, when it's right
Right.
for you.
Yes.
That's very, very disheartening and dangerous, I'd like to say. So being so aware that there are things we can do with it, without it, in place of it, finding the right option for you based on your body, your diagnosis, your needs, your financial situation, whatever it is. But it has to be the right thing for you, and to know that there's other things available if it's not the right thing for you.
Right. And while we're on the topic of medication, and one of the top questions that I get working in psychedelics is, what about my meds? Can I take magic mushrooms, psilocybin? Can I take that with my SSRI? No, because they both work on the serotonin pathway and you don't want to take them at the same time. But not taking your SSRI is not something I'm going to advise somebody to do. You have to work with your healthcare professional on that, your mental health professional, therapist.
Yeah.
But they're not always safe to have this conversation with, So, but your medication, I took my first full dose of LSD a couple of weeks ago, and we were going to take psilocybin. We were going to take mushrooms, and decided not to. And I had taken my medication that morning because I'm not taking anything that interacts with serotonin receptors. It's an SNRI and then my stimulant meds. Well, my Adderall works with dopamine receptors, and so does LSD. So I did take my medicine and I did take the LSD, and I was fine. I talked for 8 hours, which I don't know if that's what anyone wanted me to do, but that's what I ended up doing. But that's an example of the type of math. Like, it's not going to hurt me. I know I'm not going to get hurt if I do this, but it just is not going to produce maybe the ideal outcome, because the LSD won't have the same effect because all my receptors are already playing with the medication that I've given them. So, but yeah, understanding how these psychedelics are interacting with your body and how your medication works with your own body is critical. And women and our hormones throughout our life are affected by the medications that we take, or, our hormones affect those medications, and, how potent they are, or if they're even working at certain times of month, if that makes sense. Yeah.
No, it does make sense. And that's such a good point. It's so important to work in tangent with your doctor, because it's so important with everything. I always say this with my grandma, and she wants to like yell at me all the time because she's like, I want to take 10 different types of mucus medication. Great, I get that. You can't. But it's like, you so quick, like you want to take different things that are going to work for you, that you think might work for you, that all sound great. But always remember to check in with your healthcare provider and find what you can and can't do, what can and can't interact, because you also want to be safe doing it. Things can be great tools, but if you don't use them safely, they can also not be great tools. So being very, very mindful of that. But I have a question. So, with taking the first full dose of LSD, what was that experience like for you?
I had taken microdoses and gone out dancing. So I had a night, it definitely energizes you. Like I said, it works with your dopamine receptors. So oftentimes with psilocybin, if I take a high dose of psilocybin, I am very much tired and need to be lying down somewhere. That is the complete opposite way that I felt with LSD. We were outside. I reserve my larger doses that I might have maybe once every 3 or 4 months for nature, to be out in nature. And so we'd driven out to an island off the coast of Washington and planned to spend one night. It was me and one girlfriend, and it was her property. So, we felt safe, and she has 20 acres. So we just set out on a hike. A safe hike, no cliffs or anything like that. And I expected this would happen, that I would become overwhelmed by just everything that nature provides for us.
Yeah.
And always has. And there were old growth trees that she had dated, and one was over 300 years old. And so we were just taking all this in, this majesty. And the other thing that happened is I went through my entire family history of why people were the way they are and how that affected. I broke it down and got very clear on all of it and came to peace with the fact that, like any other family, there's some stuff there and some people there, right, that have tainted a little bit of our family tree, and was able to really just laugh about it. And I laughed about everything that day. There was so much laughter. And what I've brought into my life after that, and with taking psilocybin in microdoses and in lower doses, I laugh so much more than I have in many, many years. And I'm really grateful for that, because it's contagious. Once you start laughing at things, more things are funny. Yeah.
Yeah. It changes everything when you can start laughing again and feeling genuinely happy. But okay. So first of all, it sounds like you did it very intentionally. So you
Yes.
found a space that you felt safe, and you did it with someone, and then you were able to kind of find healing through it, which I love. Were you expecting to find healing through it when you started it? What was your expectation going in?
No, this friend she's my birthday twin. We were born the same day, the same year. We just met in the last few years. So we both have tried to consume mushrooms together, and we don't get high. I don't know what happens, but it doesn't work. And when we were doing it independently, we both really struggle with visual hallucinations, which is something that we want. We're both creatives, but we don't get them as intensely maybe as others do. And we found ourselves super frustrated. So the choice to have LSD that day was in the hopes that we would have really great visual hallucinations. And my vision was really, I couldn't see too far in front of me. It was very blurry, I guess is the best way to describe it. But it wasn't because there were all these fragmented shapes and really cool. That wasn't happening. So the people that I've talked to said, well, you just need to take more next time. So I guess I might try to do that. So unfortunately, I would say that we bonded, but we didn't quite get the visuals that we were hoping for. Yeah.
That makes
I don't
sense.
know. I can tell you what I've heard as to why that may happen.
Yeah.
So when we're younger and we take psychedelics, or we take, try to think of the word, but when we take psychedelics, the visuals are because when you take psychedelics, ultimately, as you age, you are drawing from your life experience to make sense of everything, like I did that day 2 weeks ago. When you're young, you don't have a lot of life experience. So the medicine is giving you all the stuff in the present to entertain you.
Yeah.
So I've talked to a lot of people now. Like I said, I'm 47 years old, and this is fairly common, where the ability to tap into visual hallucinations diminishes as you age, but your ability to like draw on your emotions and to use these substances, these modalities for healing, I think it just becomes closer to where we are at that time and what we care about more. So yeah, that seems to be what happens.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, obviously, when we're younger, we haven't experienced as much. And at the same time, even if we have, I don't know that we've always made sense of it yet. I think a lot of things start to present a little bit later on. I know for me, things didn't present until I was in different relationships, until things changed and I wasn't suddenly like under the protection of my parents all the time. So a lot of things don't really manifest fully until later. So it makes sense that the medications or psychedelics would present differently and work differently based on where you're at in life.
Yeah, exactly. I also I want to I hope I answered your question.
No, you did. I was just very fascinated because I watched the 60-minute special on psychedelics and how it's been helping people to actually like heal and doing it intentionally, which I had never heard a conversation about intentionally using psychedelics. Usually the conversations are like, oh, at a party, I decided to do this. And so I was really fascinated to learn more about how it actually can be more than just like to enhance a party.
Right, exactly. Yeah, psychedelic assisted therapy. What happens in these party settings, right, is no one's really thinking about their family medical history. They may have already had a couple of drinks and someone's like, hey, let's try this. This is a good idea. Hands you a Ziploc bag, of caps and stems, and you start to sort it out. Well, or someone passes you a joint from a legal dispensary, right? And one of the conversations that isn't happening enough is the fact if you have bipolar in your family history, if that diagnosis is present, you should not ever consume cannabis, nor should you consume psychedelics. They're doing a lot of medical research right now around psilocybin and around LSD for people that have a diagnosis of bipolar to see at lower doses, like really trying to dial it in. They feel there could potentially be a solution there, either for symptoms or I don't know, but just at a party and that your uncle, for instance, has bipolar or your dad did or whatever the case may be, you can't go near those substances because it could be latent in you and it could trigger a psychotic event or episode.
Wow. Okay. I love that you share that. That is such important information. And again, that's not a conversation that's had very often. So being very mindful and aware of your family history, of what's kind of happening in your life, and being willing to talk to a doctor about what's safe for you, what's right for you, and figuring out together, not kind of going into it all on your own and just kind of playing that guessing game. Is it going to work? Is it not going to work? What's going to happen? But doing research when you can, making informed decisions and doing what's right for you in that moment. And hopefully the decision you choose works out in a very safe and good way.
That's right. Yes.
It has been so fun talking with you and learning from you. As we're wrapping up, can you tell us how we can watch your podcast, listen to your podcast, connect with you, learn more?
Sure. Yeah. Again, my name is April Pride, and my podcast is called The High Guide, which is the podcast for my company called Of Like Minds. And Of Like Minds, we're based here in Seattle, and I launched a psilocybin brand. My history is that I create brands for women. And in my later career, now it's been in cannabis and psychedelics. And I've sold 2 companies in cannabis. I'm a creative entrepreneur. And this company that I've been working on for the last couple of years, I launched a psilocybin brand underground last year because people, as a podcast host about psychedelics, kept asking me, where do I get this? And I couldn't really point to a trusted source, right? So I decided to try and figure it out myself, found a trusted source, gave myself a made up name and just told my friends to contact this made up name, but it was me. And so I learned a lot, and I'm now bringing that brand into the light and working within Seattle's decriminalized framework. So we host events in Seattle that are educational events. We'll have ticketed events that are more for entertainment. And at the ticketed events, we will gift psilocybin for you to consume. No more than 1 gram. We're going to keep the doses fairly low. And then we have a website that's launching in the next month, and available on the website are downloads, educational downloads to help, like, this is what you should listen to. This is what you should think about in terms of your setting. This is the dose that you might want to consider based on the outcome that you're looking for. And then if you live in Seattle, you can come by and pick up your free gift of psilocybin with the purchase of your download. So yeah, that's what we're launching. It's pretty revolutionary. I'm very excited about all this. Yeah.
That is amazing. Congratulations on all of that. And I am so grateful for the awareness you're spreading, what you are doing. You are incredible. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Fran. Same to you.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.